Greg, we all long to be loved and to be accepted. Why is that?
Because God made us for that end even. God is love, He is benevolent, He's sharing His glory with the universe, and He made us in His image to long for His acceptance, to find our true purpose when we are resting in receiving His love and receiving His mercy and receiving His approval, His acceptance, His encouragement. That's how God designed human beings.
I went to church, and I went because we were supposed to, and so I did. It wasn't every Sunday. It was when I felt I needed Him. Did the teenager things, dabbled in alcohol and drugs, and I don't know what I was looking for, but I wasn't finding it. And some of those choices that I made as a teenager, just filled me with regret. I wish they weren't in my story. I wish I could just start over. I ended up in a relationship, and I was pregnant, and I ended up having an abortion at 19, and that was really hard. I didn't want God to be there seeing what I was going through, seeing what I was doing. So in my head, I just didn't. My prayers were that He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't listening or watching over me. When I was 20, I ended up getting pregnant again, and carried my daughter to term, and I became a mom. Shortly after that, she was about a year old. I started going back to work, and I met my soon-to-be husband, and I felt like that was my second chance, that God put him in my path for me to help guide me. We would go to church, and we would go consistently for a while, and then things were good. So He wasn't as needed in our head, but so obviously we weren't going about it the right way. We weren't having the relationship. We did our best. We tried it as best as we could. But when we finally had the opportunity to move to Illinois, at that time, my freshman had said, okay, but we have to go to church every weekend. We agreed, and I researched some churches, found one that I thought the whole family would like. Knowing that we had the best intentions, we were still having a hard time with working things out. We were a blended family. This one particular Sunday that we both remember, we were having a very bad week. And it had gotten to the point where I was ready to move back home with my girls. And I was done. I was ready to throw in the towel. And the pastor came to the stage and was talking about there has to be some people in the audience that are having a hard time, that are ready to be done with it, marriages. And we looked at each other, and it just seemed like he was speaking directly to us. My husband grabbed my hand, and he said, we're not done. We're still working this through. God moved us here for a reason. We both made the decision to really try and bring that relationship into the family, to bring our girls, to make sure that they all went to Stuco, went to services every Sunday, that we went into a small group. So it was new to us. It was different, and a little awkward in the beginning, but just because I knew my story, and that bothered me. It plagued me, and I wouldn't talk about it with my husband. So it was one of those things I kept in the dark. That was my burden to carry, my cross to bear. And I was in that jail cell with the doors wide open and sitting there punishing myself, even though I had already been forgiven. He was there, and he was holding my hand. And so now I know. And so when I have those days, it's not the same. And even with him knowing what I've done, I am forgiven, and I'm still his daughter.
So the son is home. He's being embraced by his father, but he's still holding on to his regret and his past. when we see this, he's kind of saying, I'm no longer your son still. But many of us feel the same way towards God, that sometimes when we come home, we experience God, we can actually let our past push us away from him. How do you respond to someone like that, who's feeling that?
It's hard to receive. If someone reaches out with a large gift, like we don't know what to do with that. Like I need to earn, if someone brings food over, we're having a hard time. It's like, I don't need help. Like we have a hard time receiving because the brutalness of pride. To reach a place where you can surrender and receive and say, I don't have what it takes to produce anything here. You love me, and I'm going to rest in that. That's a great place to be.
Yeah.
I think in the passage it communicates that pretty well when he starts to go into that speech that he had prepared when he was still in the pigsty, when he came to an understanding of just how good it would be even of a servant at his father's house. And he goes into that, and that's still that past kind of expectation of what the Father's going to do. And that's how we approach God so often, is we still are holding on to those things. We have our own expectations even in our human relationships of what we expect. So when we see this response from God, that really that is how we help people see that. Go back to this and read this and understand that we come into it with our baggage, and God goes, we don't need that.
Good. How does the Father respond to the Son, and what does it tell us about who God is?
So again, that surprise. He kills the fatted calf. He brings the robe and the ring way beyond any expectation. In fact, just human nature, you fight against that. We think, even God's favor, somehow we think we've earned it. And God's favor on others, we think they haven't earned it enough. To actually, just to receive above and beyond unlimited graciousness.
He was given his father's inheritance. In demanding his inheritance, he said, "Dad, I wish you were dead. Like, could we hold the funeral?"
Yeah.
And demanded that inheritance out of him. So he comes back to an estate of which there's nothing that is rightfully his there. Not a scrap in the pigsty is his. And yet his father gives him that which is not his. It's a beautiful picture of our inheritance with God. That God gives us that which we squandered, and that is not ours rightfully. And that sets that whole relationship up, which is just so true. As long as I have in my relationship with God this seed in my heart that says, really at the base, I'm pretty good. I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah.
I'm like B plus. As long as that's there in our heart, that there's some merit, that there's something that we've earned in that, then it's a faulty foundation. So it has to be built on this, that every gift is totally and completely undeserved and not ours. And that shifts our entire perspective on our life. It's not just saved by grace. It's not just that salvation piece. It's not we just get through the door and then it's like, okay, good luck, Lance. Time to work your way, time to pull your weight now. It's like, no, you're through the door by grace, and every day is grace, is a gift, and is an offering of God to us.
We're just wired differently. Our flesh is wired differently. So we think God will talk to me if I pray enough. God will bless me if I read scripture enough, if I obey enough. We place an awful lot on our own merit, but to realize he treats us so far above and beyond.
Just in the story, I think it's kind of a neat aspect. Even the gifts that he gives his son, a robe, a ring, shoes, things that when he was in that pigsty, he was probably missing, but he wasn't thinking about those. He was just thinking about food. And a better life and at some level, but the Father just rewards him. And those are all even symbols of family and prestige to some extent. And so the Father's welcoming back at a estate he has nothing in anymore, and just fully welcomes him back into the family. And I think that aspect of God's love is just powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we actually took God at his word, then how much he loves us, how would that change us?
It would radically transform everything. We'd be at complete peace. We would know that we're fully protected. Everything's going to be okay. I mean, we would completely rest and reach that place of complete satisfaction.
I think a lot of times we let our circumstances, we almost see that maybe this is God disciplining me, and we look at that side of God more so than his love. And if we can fully accept God loves us, and despite the circumstances that we live in, we can see God's love for us within that, then it just totally changes everything.
Yeah.
You know, Paul even talked about, all that he had been through and everything, all the suffering, but it's all for God.
Yeah.
When we have that view, it totally transforms everything about us.
It's hard though. So both brothers miss it. The prodigal is, well, maybe I can be like the servants. Like he misses all of the lavish. The other brother is, God, he doesn't love me that much. Why is he taking care of him? It is. I used to think of love as kind of a milk and cookies soft thing. There's nothing milk and cookies about it. It is hard and deep, and just because of our own sinfulness. We have to fight to reach that place of receiving, I think.
And I think it is often the way we approach God's forgiveness. We look at it as like, oh, I don't deserve it. I can't take it. I think one of the things that we do is that we say, okay, I accept God's forgiveness, but I still have to forgive myself. And we get the whole thing like, we actually, when we say I have to forgive myself, what we say is that God's forgiveness is not enough, or that it shows us that we did not comprehend his love. Because if his love isn't enough to wipe it out, to get our in peace back to him, back to people, then we're doomed. There's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
So understand God's love means living in the light of it. And it's just so hard for us because of the whole merit thing and having to prove to ourselves that we deserve it, that we can do it. It is a society where the culture is you have to deserve it, you have to make it. So it's the whole time like it's a pressure over us in every single piece of our life, including our relationship with God. So we have to come to terms with the fact that, do I know God's character? Do I take him at his word when he say, you're forgiven?
As we just kind of wrap this session up, I just would encourage you this week to take time to understand God's love. John 3:16, for God so loved the world. The reality, for God so loved and put your name in that spot, that he died for you, and that you would recognize and you would come to a place in your life, not based upon your own merit or your own good works or how good or how bad, but that you recognize that you need God's love and you need to experience his love in your life every day.
So this chapter ends with a prayer. God, if you're real, make yourself real to me. Awaken in me the awareness that I am your unconditionally loved child. I don't know how you felt like you had to earn love as a child, or how you have felt like you've had to earn love as an adult. None of us experience pure unconditional love in this world. Pause to realize God does love you and me unconditionally. He paid the price. He gave everything. so that there are no conditions on you and me. He loves us. Let's rest in that.